morning and welcome to this hybrid session of Sefako Makhatu University, where we are going to make sure that as we interact, we come up with creative solutions. It's a situation of crisis meets innovation as we discuss higher education, medical science, and fourth industrial revolution. Well, I've got Professor Situsa to help us, as the name implies, Utluhurtusa, to understand what today's session is going to be about. And Professor Situsa, please give us your welcoming remarks. Kalbu.
Thank you, Tim Dise, for the warm words of welcoming us. My task for this morning is actually to welcome you all to the second day of this historic 50th scientific meeting of the IADR, which is hosted by the Sefako Makhatu Health Sciences University. It is Friday the 13th of November, but don't be worried about that Friday the 13th syndrome, because nothing will go wrong. Instead, it is actually the day on which I was born, and I believe that everything will go right. As a university, we are thankful and indeed privileged to have been given the opportunity of breaking the ice in terms of organizing this one-of-a-kind Congress. As we all know, we have to change and adapt to the new way of doing things. And it was indeed a challenge for the organizing committee to put together a Congress of this nature in such a short period of time. Before the lockdown, we had already started preparing for the conventional face-to-face Congress, and little did we know that we would have to suddenly stop due to the lockdown. We had all given up about ever having this event, and indeed most organizations sent out notices of cancellations of these type of events. When the opportunity to restart the planning arose following the relaxation of the lockdown rules, there were doubts as to whether we would ever be able to pull an event of this nature, considering the short time that was available. The technology that was required to support and manage this event was foreign to us, and naturally tensions ran high, storms erupted, but eventually calm prevailed. A team was set up to organize the event, and we all jumped and started activating this and that, and voila, it all fell into place. Colleagues, it is through these sudden challenges in life, what we normally call the rude awakening, such as the COVID-19 pandemic, that we begin to realize how, if we work together, we are able to can move mountains. Yes, I know here and there we may have rubbed each other on the wrong side, but it was for the good of the Congress, and all that is now forgotten. Here we are now, and I want to take this opportunity to thank the IADR Executive Committee, the local organizing committee at large, the sponsors, the university with all its various support structures such as the MIAVs under the leadership of Nicolette, the public relations team, etc. And finally, but by no means the least, the broadcasting team. For the sweat and tears shed towards carrying this event. This is the second IADR Congress I'm involved in organizing, and my special thanks goes towards Makta Foshie, the Executive Secretary of the school, who anchors all, and I mean all, aspects of planning and executing this event. She is indeed multi-talented and is always willing to serve. Yesterday, following the welcome by the University of the IADR South African President, the keynote speaker, Dr. Mofe, left us with a challenge of creating centers of excellence in dentistry. A panel of invited speakers followed and discussed how the pandemic has challenged the manner in which we teach and train our students. Prof. Sherlock gave us her perspective on the pharmacological challenges we face regarding this COVID-19 virus. The scientific presentations were finally done, and congratulations once again to the winner. And we hope in future more and more researchers will enter these competitions. We were indeed blessed with a plethora of submissions, and as the saying goes, no one must be left behind. So we did not want to exclude anyone, and we included all the abstracts which were submitted. Yes, there were a few technical challenges, so our sincere apology to those whose presentations were affected. It was not a case of sabotage. The atmosphere is changing now in this broadcasting room as a high-powered team of presenters and panel members get ready to take their platform. Yes, today you will be treated to a high-profile discussion and presentations, and as once again Dr. Mufe advised us yesterday, we need to get out of our silos. We need to stop thinking out of the box, but rather push the box away and start thinking without boundaries. We need to bring about convergence of science, and in that way, science will benefit the community. Let us all dwell in this well of knowledge and wisdom, and as the saying goes in the broadcasting world, don't push that dial. I want to thank you, but before I get off the podium, I just want to take this opportunity to ask Dr. Makwakwa to come forward to give a token of appreciation to our Executive Secretary, Magda Foshier. As I mentioned, she continuously and without complaint is willing to assist in the preparations and the execution of all these events. Magda Foshier, please come forward to receive your gift. And may God bless you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Tim Modise, over to you.
And thank you very much, Professor Situsa, and congratulations to you, Magda. As I have indicated, this is a hybrid session, meaning that we've got members of the audience here in this room. We also have delegates following the proceedings from different parts of the country via Facebook, via YouTube, and other platforms. So 2020 has indeed arrived. It's not only the concerns about our personal health and the health of our loved ones, but even the way we work has changed, and it is thanks to people like Professor Marwala and their innovations, that on one hand we have the health scientists doing their best to reverse the spread of COVID-19 and find therapies and vaccines for us, but on the other hand, the technologists, the technology scientists have come to the party with the solutions that make it possible to communicate from wherever we may be, and that has made life a lot easier for all of us. So for me personally and many others, this is an opportunity to learn. I'm here to not only facilitate, but to observe and listen very carefully. The next speaker is the Vice Chancellor of the University of Joburg, and somebody that many of us are very proud of his achievements and contributions to the advancements in his chosen field, as well as the advancements in South Africa. I was teasing him earlier on, saying that on one hand, he's got to run an important institution such as UJ, find time to teach, participate and give papers at different conferences in South Africa and around the world. But guess what? He's done something extra, which is a challenge to many of us who've got so much time on our hands. He's published at least 3 books this year. And I asked him, I say, Prof, where do you find the time to make all of this come together? His most recent book is called Closing the Gap. So Professor Marwala is here to help us close the gap, including in the medical sciences. And he's here to tell us a bit more. And it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you very much, Tim. I have a presentation, if it could just be beamed here. So we are obviously confronted with two main shifts that are happening in society. The first one is the fourth industrial revolution. Technology is changing all aspects of our lives. And the second one is obviously the pandemic. And both these major shifts are not going to be attained without the use of technology, without the use of education. My presentation is still not showing. So, while I wait for the presentation, I can't see it. Are we able to?
Oh, there we go. Got it.
Thank you very much. I always say that sometimes when decisions are left to humans, we have things like this. So the fourth industrial revolution and higher education. So one of the major shifts that is changing our lives is obviously the fourth industrial revolution. Now, if we could just maybe briefly reflect on what this fourth industrial revolution is all about. We know about the first industrial revolution that gave us steam engines. Tim, you probably still remember a steam train.
Absolutely.
We were using a steam engine in South Africa in the 80s, all the way to the 80s, which was coal-fired, especially the line from the Pipi Rust to Louis Trichardt. It was using coal. So this was almost 300 years ago. But the principle there was that for the first time we were able to use machines in order to build things that actually do things that we are supposed to do. Then came the second industrial revolution, electricity and mass production of goods and services. Again, this led to the massive decrease in the cost of production. The cars became a household phenomenon. And then came the third industrial revolution, Deputy Minister, welcome, which was really about electronics. Now we are in the fourth industrial revolution, where the cyber technologies, artificial intelligence, blockchain, quantum computing, Internet of Things, together with the physical technologies, robotics, 3D printing, new materials, together with developments in the biological spaces, gene editing. The confluence of these technologies is what is known as the fourth industrial revolution. And one of the big technologies that is driving the fourth industrial revolution is artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence is basically a technology that allows us to build machines that are intelligent. If machines are intelligent, they are able to do much of the work, white-collar work, that we have always thought it could only be done by human beings, with all sorts of implications on who we are as human beings. Now, an important aspect of artificial intelligence is machine learning. It uses data in order to make decisions. For example, in a security system which looks at your face and be able to either allow you or deny you entrance to a particular place, it will be able to learn the relationship between a picture of a person or an image of a person and the identity of such a person. Of course, for these machines to work, you must have data. That is why they say data is the new oil. You must have huge amounts of data to train these algorithms. And if you do not train it comprehensively, then it discriminates. I often talk about a country that I visited where when I arrived there, I put a picture of on my passport, and then it compares the picture on my passport with the picture it is seeing on the camera. And it could not recognize me and my colleague of African descent, but could recognize people of European descent. Such mistakes are not just on applications like that. In medical sciences, where decision making now, medical diagnostics by machines is increasingly becoming widespread, the same problems are actually going to surface. Now, this is an example of a robot that is driving a car. As you can see, it is not a human being. It looks like a human being. Because it looks like a human being, it's called a humanoid. So it is able to drive a car. And by the way, a self-driving car does not necessarily even have to have a physical robot driving it. You can just design a car to drive itself. It can be able to open doors. So it can be able to do all sorts of activities that you would normally associate with a human being, with all sorts of implications on the world of work, on whether it is in industry, whether it is in our hospitals. Very, very important technology. So now, how does it do all this? It is able to learn. It can sense using sophisticated cameras. It can react, it can drive, it can walk. It is able to learn using artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is a technology that makes machines intelligent, as I have already indicated. It is almost human. And because it is almost human and it can do all these things that are done by a human being, we say it is artificially intelligent. But there are many aspects of this robot that it cannot be able to do. It is not conscious. The issue of a conscious machine is a difficult thing that we have not yet achieved. But the impact of these robots on the labor market is going to be quite substantial. And the resulting impact of the reduction of the size of our labor market on tax revenues will also be quite substantial. Given all this, we have to look into our laws to make sure that they are able to handle things like self-driving cars. What happens if it makes a mistake? And many times when we talk about self-driving cars, we say, but these things are not happening here in South Africa. They are here in South Africa. If you just have a sophisticated mid-range car, you have things that are automated. Universal basic income, issues of universal basic income are coming to the fore. What do we do in a situation where our labor market just becomes smaller because of automation? And I don't think this is an issue of choice. It's an issue of competitiveness. If we do not invest in these technologies, then we simply are not going to produce goods at a competitive levels, and ultimately people are going to lose jobs. Now, this whole idea of artificial intelligence is changing all aspects of our lives. So one of the examples that I'm going to give you here is the example of interstate conflict. Can we be able to train a machine to be able to tell us if two countries are going to go to war or not? It turns out you can actually be able to do that. This is the book that I wrote in that regard. It was translated into Chinese. So all we need to do is to look at data. The variables that we're looking at is whether the countries that we are assessing share a border, the distances between their capitals, the difference between their investment in military hardware, the amount of treaties between the two countries, the amount of trade between these two countries. All these are variables that can be measured. And it turns out that you can be able to predict conflicts better than human beings. Now, what happens to all those people who come to universities and study a discipline called political science? And given all these developments that are happening in this space, how should we train our cadres of political scientists? I think, of course, we always taught our political scientists social sciences. We always taught them about political science. We always told, some universities will even teach psychology to political scientists. Of course, if you look at the war between China and United States, the trade war, it has become a psychological war. So conflict often becomes a psychological phenomenon very, very quickly. But we need to start teaching them about data, because if they are going to use these technologies, they need to understand data. We need to teach them about technology, something that we don't necessarily do to our political scientists. This is an example now in the health domain. This is a work that I did with my student, Simon Scarrell. This is an image of a lung. So a doctor looks at this lung image and makes a diagnosis as to whether there is pulmonary embolism or not. Very dangerous disease. Now, we were testing this to see whether a machine can be able to do such a diagnosis better than a human doctor. A study was done, a similar study was done where radiologists were given medical images. I think it was about 100 radiologists who were given 100 images, and they were asked to make a diagnosis, and they made a diagnosis, all of them. The information was stored, and then 2 months later, the same doctors were put in the room. They were given the same images to make the same diagnosis. Apparently, half of them changed their minds. And when doctors change their minds, it means somebody who was supposed to be assisted was not assisted, and somebody who was not supposed to be assisted was assisted. Wastage of resources, and often leads to loss of life. And when we were able to build this artificial intelligence, it was able to make a diagnosis to the accuracy of over 99%. There was a cover article on The Economist where they were talking about the death of radiologists because artificial intelligence is a better diagnostic tool for image-based pathologies than human doctors. Now, given all these changes, how do we train the next generation of doctors? I think we should teach them physical sciences, we should teach them biological sciences, medical sciences, but we need to teach them about technology. We need to teach them about data. They need to become techno-health workers, simply because technology is becoming much, much more paramount, much more sophisticated technology than the traditional stethoscope that many of us are accustomed to. This is an example of how artificial intelligence is changing the whole field of infrastructure. How do we maintain our infrastructure? This is the work that I did with my then master student, Dr. Busisiwe Vilakazi. So she was looking at our electricity grid and seeing whether we can deploy artificial intelligence to see when the infrastructure is about to fail. And then we were able to build this system, and it was able to decide whether the infrastructure is going to to succeed or not. She went on to Oxford to complete a PhD, but what she was doing was to use the same technology in an intensive care unit where you basically put all sorts of sensors on a patient, and an artificial intelligence machine is able to monitor the health of patients real time. I mean, I remember the last time I was in hospital, every 30 minutes, a nurse will come and take vital measurements. Now here, you get information almost every second. So it is quite time critical. The other field that is being changed by artificial intelligence, you know, the field of economics. I've spent a lot of time working in economic phenomena. If you go to our banks, when you apply for loans, they have to do credit scoring. If you go and if you want an insurance to cover your, as a farmer, I'm also a farmer now, to cover the drought period, you need what is called derivatives, options and derivatives. They need to be priced. And all this work is traditionally done by high, they are called, you know, it's tech people, you know. So now, can we be able to, can that work be done by by artificial intelligent machines? And we found out that indeed, artificial intelligence is able to do credit scoring better than human beings. It is able to price options and derivatives better than human beings. In fact, it is able to do all sorts of activities that are done in the banks. Now, given all this, how do we train the next generation of financial workers? They should be engineers, they should be accountants, they should be economists, they should understand technology, very, very important. I wrote a Business Day article, and Michael Jordan, who is one of our top bankers, replied to my question. He says, bankers of the future will need to be engineers more than economists. And I think the same thinking can actually be transported to medical sciences, to say that doctors of the future probably will need to be technologists than traditional doctors. If robots are now performing operations much, much more precisely, then of course we'll come to this question sooner rather than later. Now, given the fact that human beings now are interacting with machines, how do we train psychologists? What we need to understand is that there's been a convergence of people and machines. If I take away your phone from you for an hour, you will not be in a good state of mind. And the reason for that is because you and that phone have become a single system. Now, if you go to our psychology classes, and I love psychology, as an engineer we were expected to take psychology, and artificial intelligence is full of psychological phenomena. In fact, one of the most influential algorithm that was used by Google to solve, to beat a human chess champion in a chess game called Go, that originates from China, uses a phenomena that comes from psychology called reinforcement learning. Now, given the fact that humans and machines have become a system, how do we train the psychologists of the future? Of course, you need to teach them about psychology, but you need to teach them about data, you need to teach them about information. So they have to become techno-psychologists. Now I am going to come to the end. Given all this, looking forward, what are the skills that we need to teach in order for our people to be full participants in this? This is from the World Economic Forum. Cognitive ability is very important. Systems thinking, very, very important. We'll be able to see things as interconnected systems. Complex problem solving. Content skills is still very important. Process skills, social skills, and so on and so forth. And we can only be able to impart these skills through multidisciplinary education. Those who are studying technological subjects must necessarily also study social and human sciences. And those who are studying social and human sciences must also study technology. So the consequences of the era in which we live in, post-work era, our workplace is going to be smaller. Whatever you do, it is going to be smaller. We need to up the game on the skills level. We need to understand the political economy of this new world that is emerging. This is going to be a tale of two worlds, one very prosperous and another one very poor. The workplace is changing. Kosatu talks about exploitation in the workplace. The fourth industrial revolution is ushering human irrelevance. Liberty, our freedoms are now being controlled. If you are on Facebook, Facebook knows where you are. It can even urge you to vote in a particular way with all sorts of implications on the future of democracy. I think the issue of ethics is very, very important. I think the issue of nationality, I think there is an adverse reaction to these developments that we have seen in the United States and Europe, becoming much more nationalistic. But I think the future of nations is going to change. No matter what you see, it is going to change. The walls are going to fall. Of course, because people are now digitally operating. There's now a concept of a digital residency, where you can work in a place without being physically there. You are given a digital work permit, because you won't physically go to the country, but you are working there. Social cohesion is going to be challenged by these changes. And the issue of ownership, especially of data, which is the new oil, is very, very important. I was the deputy chair of the Presidential Commission on the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And we have made 8 key recommendations to make sure that our people are actually thriving in this new era. The first recommendation is to invest in human resource capacity in the areas of the fourth industrial revolution, artificial intelligence and so on and so forth. At the University of Johannesburg, artificial intelligence is now a compulsory subject for all first-year students. Secondly, we need to establish the National Artificial Intelligence Institute that is going to focus on applications of these technologies to all areas of our economy. Thirdly, we need to advance manufacturing by investing in the new technologies of production. We have deindustrialized simply because we have not invested in technologies of production. Fourthly, we need to invest in data storage, data processing. Facebook and Twitter makes huge amounts of money by mining our own data. If you are on Facebook, Facebook takes your data and goes and sells it to advertisers. So we need to own and secure our data. Some of our health data, you know, if we could just have a unified health database, the ecosystem of technologies that are going to emerge to diagnose all sorts of diseases. I mean, if you could just give me all X-ray images that have ever been collected in South Africa in the last 20 years, I can produce a system which every time you scan the image of that X-ray, you could be able to make a diagnostics of a disease. And then, fifthly, we need to incentivize the adoption of these technologies, whether it is in the form of tax breaks for companies that are investing in this. And then sixthly, we need to invest in technologies of the fourth industrial revolution. Connectivity, spectrum becomes very, very important because we are not going to participate in this unless we have world-class assets, infrastructure to be able to do this. Seventh, we need to look at all our laws and make sure that they are up to date when it comes to the issues of the fourth industrial revolution. Airbnb operates in South Africa, but it does not pay taxes because it operates from the cloud. Our legal system says you operate in South Africa if you have a physical address. But we know these companies that never even come here. If you want to access them, you go to their website. But they are operating just like any other hotel business, and they're making lots of money. They need to be brought into our regulatory framework. So it is important, and this is just one of the examples. There are multiple of examples that of laws that we need to update. And lastly, we actually need to implement. I think we have talked for quite a long time. I think now it is time to implement. So thank you very much. And by the way, you can go to Exclusive Books and buy my book, Closing the Gap. It has more information on these 300 rands you will not regret. You see, Tim, I'm also a salesman. Thank you very much. Ngiyabonga.
And thank you very much, Professor Chilisi Marwala, for your presentation. Actually, very provocative for me, but obviously the colleagues in the health sciences will focus predominantly on the side that matters and is relevant to them. For me, as an ordinary citizen, I must say, Prof, two immediate things came to mind as we were presenting. One is the problem at the traffic department, the licensing, that the issues that we talk about, I suppose, address that issue almost immediately, that the queues can be done away with almost, within a day or two, if some of these technologies were already being implemented. And the second, maybe more importantly, for those who go to miracle churches and prophetic churches, that maybe you could use artificial intelligence or you know, the emerging intelligences that you spoke about to tell which of the pastors is better value for money than the other. And we could also ask you and the other experts to test the miracles that they perform, whether they are legit and they last for a longer time than we are told they do. So there are immediate uses that I see. So I'm already scoping out an area of interest for myself. Now, Professor Hendricks, if you could please come forward. We've got a token of appreciation for you, Prof.
Thank you very much.
And let me also alert the Deputy Minister of Higher Education to be on standby.
Well, Professor Mawala, thank you very
Thank
much
you very much.
for this very
Thank you.
exciting talk.
Thank
You
you.
stimulated us for the rest of the day.
Thank you.
And may it go well with you as you continue on your journey with 4IR, going to 5IR.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Deputy Minister. Good to see you.
Let me call on the Deputy Minister of Higher Education and Training. There are already some points that Professor Marwala has highlighted, which in a way outline the work for the Department of Higher Education and require a response from the government. And I'm pleased that the Deputy Minister is here with us. He heard for himself. He's got his own ideas from a policy point of view, implementation point of view, funding point of view, as well as establishment of the institutions. Oh, okay. All right. We've got to take a commercial break. Can you believe it?
evolutionary process going on, but mankind won't be destroyed. The fact that you and I are working here today is evidence of that.
Thank you very much, and we are back with you. The presentations continue as we focus on higher education and fourth IR, and would still like to thank Sefako Makhatu University for organizing this event. We heard from Professor Chilizi Marwala earlier on. Now it's the opportunity of the Deputy Minister of Higher Education and Training, Tate Bhuti Manamela, to give us his response as well as ideas of how government is going to deal with the issues that emanate from this two-day conference. Tate Manamela, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Let me firstly extend greetings to the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Sefako Makgatho University. I haven't seen him, but I'll acknowledge him in absentia. And also the Vice Chancellor and Principal of the University of Johannesburg, who just made a presentation, Professor Chilizi Marwala, the Dean of the School of Oral Health Sciences at Sefako Makgatho University, Professor Stephen Hendricks, the Head of Pharmacology at the University of Free State, Professor Mutlalepule Matsabisa, and all those who were involved in the organizing of this conference, delegates from all over the world and from all over the country. Good morning. And thank you for this invitation to be part of this bold and yet innovative and forward-looking occasion, which is the 50th International Association for Dental Research Conference, which interestingly is taking place virtually under the theme Fourth Industrial Revolution, COVID-19, and higher teaching and learning. So I really want to congratulate the Sefako Makgatho Health Sciences University for their decision to host the conference, but also for choosing the Fourth Industrial Revolution, otherwise known as 4IR, as the main topic for consideration, because the Fourth Industrial Revolution moves beyond the borders of professions. I think, as Professor Marwala was illustrating, cutting across from economics, politics, health, which are things which touches on the lives of people on a daily basis. And I'm emphasizing this precisely because in many instances when people speak about the Fourth Industrial Revolution, we're mainly thinking about machines that are going to be replacing human functions at a grand scale. And we tend to dissociate those activities from what affects people on a daily life. So I really want to congratulate Sefako Makgatho Health Sciences for this conference and also for this particular topic, because I think it's also apt when we consider that just as the world is beginning to grapple with the notion of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, humanity itself was confronted with what is without doubt one of the most daunting challenges of our time, which is the COVID-19 pandemic. So both the Fourth Industrial Revolution and the COVID-19 have serious implications, and this is true not only for higher education, but also for each and every sector of our society. And herein lies the value of this conference, where all stakeholders can gather and jointly discuss both the challenges and the opportunities that arise from embracing the Fourth Industrial Revolution and also in response to COVID-19. And there's no doubt that the impact of the pandemic on our health and related services has forced us to embrace with agency the technological innovations of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. So it's only logical, therefore, that the phenomena of the Fourth Industrial Revolution and rapid digitization in all spheres of life should be the foremost on the agenda of government and the private sector and civil society. So, what we should be asking when considering the Fourth Industrial Revolution in this context are questions such as, what can we do better and differently so that we can contain the spread of the pandemic and save lives, which was our approach as the post-school education and training sector. But also, what are the lessons that we've learned from our experience of the pandemic, and how we can use technology to help us make changes in our lives and in the way in which we do things. So in short, how can we do things differently, and how can we do things better, and how can we adapt to what is now called the new normal? As you're no doubt aware, advances in digital technology have greatly transformed our lives, bringing everything that can be digitized within reach of our fingertips. The field of dentistry is no exception. To appreciate the impact of the fourth industrial revolution on dentistry, one only needs to look no further than the research being done on the production of prostheses, dentures, crowns, and bridges, based on impressions that are transmitted digitally to a 3D printer. So false teeth team has found new meaning. You can just design it in a laptop and then print it out, and then they just install it so that you can speak properly and look nice, yeah. Looking into the future of dentistry, an opinion by one of the advocates for modalities in teledentistry, Professor Shenuka Singh, argues that in supporting the delivery of oral healthcare services during COVID-19, specifically when physical contact or travel to a local clinic is problematic, fourth industrial revolution's interventions are going to be much more urgent. And such social-oriented ideas should be discussed further to ensure that we embrace the future of the fourth industrial revolution and use the opportunity to reorganize our oral healthcare system. This means that millions of South Africans who otherwise would not have had an opportunity for dental care would or can now be presented with that opportunity in a much more cheaper and accessible way. And although issues such as internet connectivity and availability of data remains a challenge in resource-constrained settings, it is nevertheless vital that we invest in the technologies of the future. At the same time, as we discuss the impact and opportunities of the fourth industrial revolution, we also need to manage expectations, acknowledging and appreciating that the future will be shaped by a combination of technological applications and human abilities. Does a computer think? Yes, but does it have the emotions, as Professor Marwala was saying, or asking that big question earlier on? And if we are to achieve improved, cost-efficient, and sustainable services, digital applications must be harnessed in a way that seeks to complement as opposed to supplanting the qualities that are unique to humans. And so the grand presentation of machines taking over the world in some of the science fiction films can only be averted if digital applications and innovations, technology are used to complement and make people's lives better. And therefore, we cannot dissociate the very rapid technological progress that is being made in many fields of our end professions, whilst the majority of people remain in the conditions that they find themselves and cannot access, or there's no connection between the rapid technological progress and the development of humanity. And if people see technological development and progress as alienating them from the rest of society, no doubt they would definitely shun or even revolt against such technological development or progress. And therefore, the complementarity of the two, which is technological progress and human development, should remain intertwined in all aspects of our lives. And I think part of the discussions that need to take place in this conference is the extent within which developments or progress in the areas of dental or oral care are going to be contributing towards the human development or development of the all. And so regarding the dentistry profession, and I want to quote Tim Jordan and a couple of other authors who say, and I quote, it should not be claimed or implied that digital smart data technologies will replace humans, providing dental expertise and the capacity for patient empathy. The dental team that controls digital applications remains the key and will continue to play the central role in treating patients. Instead, these authors advocate a hybrid approach of augmented intelligence as the meaningful combination of digital applications paired with human qualities and abilities in order to achieve improved dental and oral health care, ensuring the quality of life. Now, our government has already laid the foundation for a national response to the fourth industrial revolution. As with other sectors, we in higher education have been getting into the thick of things relating to the fourth industrial revolution. As the our minister, Dr. Blayton Zimande, appointed a ministerial task team to work on the implications of the fourth industrial revolution for post-school education and training. And the purpose of the task team was to essentially investigate the capacity of the post-school education and training system in its contribution to the fourth industrial revolution, producing skills that are in line with the needs of the fourth industrial revolution, and also importantly, to embrace the opportunities of the fourth industrial revolution. So what the advent of COVID-19 has seriously helped us focus on, and the mind of the task team, was how do we use the higher education sector and also the information and technology sector in order to respond to COVID-19. And it was no longer a question of whether and when to embrace technology. It has become a matter of adapting or dying. And when the hard lockdown was instituted in March, and we asked students to go, and universities, institutions of higher learning, to go on an early recess, part of the things that we urgently looked at is how do we abandon our traditional, or rather, well, not completely, but how do we abandon our traditional face-to-face models of teaching and learning? Because it was clear that with the different levels of lockdown, getting or sticking to the traditional ways of learning and teaching would put more and more students at risk, and therefore had to devise ways and means within which we can institute remote learning without leaving any student behind. And therefore we made huge interventions and investment in online learning. Emergency remote learning soon led to the concept of online education and blended learning. Under pressure from COVID-19, the post-school education and training system is obviously looking at innovative ways of providing learning and teaching, and in particular to fast-track the take-up of new technologies, to digitize teaching and learning, and also ensure that we say in unison that it can no longer be business as usual. And of course, there were challenges. Some universities were already experimenting with a hybrid learning model, where contact sessions in traditional lectures, seminars, laboratory sessions, and practicals were supplemented by platforms platforms through which additional activities, notes, and other learning resources were provided online. And naturally, this model served these institutions well in the transition to the emergence of remote learning. The shift to remote learning at the onset of the pandemic laid bare the many inequalities that exist between and amongst students and institutions, including infrastructure shortfalls as one of the major challenges that we're confronted with. The migration to emergence remote learning has in fact sharpened the existing socio-economic fault lines in our society, and particularly in the higher education sector. So part of the reasons why we adopted the multimodal interventions towards learning and teaching was precisely because some students, for instance, during the lockdown period, did not have access to technological devices, did not have access, some of them, to connectivity, and those who had both, some did not have access to data. And this meant that there had to be some interventions from government to get these students not to be left behind. But also something very interesting has been happening in our universities and also in our TVET colleges. Most of the universities and TVET colleges that I went to, which adopted the blended learning mode, were reporting that students were actually, there were higher participation rates of students. So it was quite interesting, and I hope that Professor Marwala will speak more about this, that when students are on campus and can actually walk to the auditorium to go and listen to a lecture, the participation rate was found to be much lower as compared to when students were at home and all they needed to do was to log on onto their device and watch whatever lessons that were being delivered by students. And one of the things which we need to look at much more deeper beyond the participation rate into lectures is obviously the results that would be coming out of the academic year 2020. And, it's whether the results will be up or down. It would be an interesting thing that academics should be looking at, and the kind of lessons that we've learned. But also what I found interesting in the interaction with academics, but also with students, is the fact that, this period and the need to move more towards technology as a platform for learning and teaching meant that we also had to find innovative ways to assess students, when they are at home and all of that. And I think all of these lessons that we've come up with need to be put into one pool moving forward as a contribution towards the, towards the new normal. Now, about 2 years ago, I had the pleasure of receiving a delegation from Sefako University, which was about 100 or so students from the different students' organizations, together with some of the unions. They were bringing a memorandum of demands at the head office, Department of Higher Education and Training head office. And top of the agenda for the students was the fact that they want additional accommodation at the university, reasonable as the demands were. But I think what is crucial about us taking advantage of technology and innovation and how this can be integrated into the fields of higher education, learning and teaching, means that more and more students can have access to higher education without the burden of investment into infrastructure, particularly infrastructure such as accommodation. It presents opportunities for increased access because the way in which our higher education system is structured currently is in such a way that we can only take so much or so many students into our institutions. One of our biggest university in the country, which is the University of South Africa, is indicative. I mean, so we have just above 1.2 million students in the higher education sector. UNISA accounts for close to a quarter of those students. And the demand is still even higher. And if you look at some of the contact universities, the distance learning or online learning component is on a daily basis growing. And I suppose that would be the experience with some of the programs at Sefako Makgatho University, which do not necessarily require students to be based full-time on campus. So what it means is that we will have to continuously focus on investing our resources towards blended learning. Of course, it has got its own challenges. Online learning, it's got its own challenges, different pedagogies required and all of that. But I think that, you know, our continued investment into this area, not only as the higher education sector, but also government in the overall, because when we're looking at, through the study done by both HSRC and CSIR on the geospatial, connectivity and access to connectivity devices and all of that by students in higher education, it exposed the absence of infrastructure, connectivity infrastructure in our country. So that's part of the investments that we need to be doing. But how do we transform homes, community learning centers, libraries, and all of that as institutions of learning, of remote learning for students, so that we expand in terms of access. Our continuous dependence on contact learning means that fewer and fewer students are going to have access to education. So a part of broadening access to education includes investing into blended learning or online learning as a mode of learning. So just as many sectors, we are looking at higher learning and teaching, higher education and training is looking at making paradigm shifts from traditional ways of doing things to a hybrid, flexible, and innovative methods. And the need for a post-school education and training system to respond effectively to these challenges is vital, as society traditionally looks to the universities in particular as pathfinders for the future. The PSET sector needs to reconfigure to harness the full social and economic potential of the fourth industrial revolution. We've started engagements on how to align the PSET system optimally in the context of the fourth industrial revolution, on what the gaps are, on how the post-school education and training system can be strengthened, and on what new areas of interventions are required. The answers to these questions will give the post-school education and training system confidence that the programs and initiatives that are implemented will be able to direct the entire system both to be up to date regarding the fourth industrial revolution and to produce the knowledge and skills that are needed by the country and the world. For dentistry, it is important to look at ways to increase dental research uptake. The most important factor cited as a barrier to doing research is time, as most professionals in the field are jointly appointed by provincial health departments and universities, and therefore bear a double burden of managing their patients as well as their university teaching, learning, and research commitments. It is also important to start looking at strengthening interdisciplinary health research. Research is one of the key areas where different disciplines can come together to train students on protocol development, research execution, report writing, and other forms of dissemination. In 2019, our department established the Future Professors Program, and the aim of this program is to prepare promising early career academics to become the new core of South African professors. This is a unique opportunity for young academics, and I really want to encourage those young academics who are listening from wherever they are to take up this opportunity so that we can make a positive impact on research uptake in all disciplines. So essentially, the challenge I'm posing to you as part of this conference is, firstly, and I think importantly, how do we use the fourth industrial revolution in the fields of oral health care to make a long-lasting impact in our society so that it changes it changes the lives of people directly. And for me, that's the most crucial thing. How do we use the fourth industrial revolution, technological progress, to move parallel to human development so that people are not alienated from development. And in that way, people can be able to embrace development. And this not only applies to dentistry, but in all fields and sectors of our society. Unseen opportunities, ladies and gentlemen, will arise as digital transformation takes hold in every area of our lives. There are numerous applications of technology that have yet to emerge that will transform the way we provide services in our respective areas. We need to seize every opportunity this affords us for positively influencing the direction of your sector. And I'd really like to encourage the dentistry fraternity to leverage the power of the fourth industrial revolution and to play your part in taking dentistry to the next level. I wish you all the best in this conference. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, thank you. And before Dr. Manamela, please remain at the lectern there. There's a question from one of the attendees. The question goes, how would the Department of Higher Education balance or manage the demand from students for accommodation, and given the fact that learning at home may not be conducive? There are environments that most students live in, their places of residence, their homes, as well as the recognition to innovate around multimodal teaching and learning facilities, given the fiscal constraints that the government finds itself in at this time?
Yeah. Look, firstly, if we look at the challenge of student accommodation in our country, there was an audit that we made a couple of years ago which shows that we have a shortfall of about 300,000 beds. Now that can run into billions of rands. And that's for both the university and TVET college sectors. So what it means is that if we want every student who goes to a higher education and training institution to be accommodated at that institution, we have to accept as a country that we must put on hold new entrance into the system. And so that's why part of the big thing for us, looking into the fourth industrial revolution, is how do we strengthen existing platforms of technology that are aimed at creating more access to both university and the TVET sector. So so the study that I spoke earlier on in my speech, which the minister asked the CSIR and HSRC to do, part of the things that it was doing was to look at the centers of learning and teaching that we can use in our communities. So, UNISA already have, hundreds of these sectors all over. We've got community libraries all over. We've got, community-based centers that, we can use as learning centers. But we also have to ensure that, part of the discussions that we've been having in the PSAT sector is how do we get universities to collaborate so that content becomes cheaper and more accessible, to students. We've been engaged with the Department of Telecommunications. Both ministers have been talking about how, technological infrastructure for education. So we believe that those kind of interventions will help a lot to increase access, to make education much more cheaper, which means that the state can invest into other areas if access to education is much more cheaper. To improve on quality, because as is now, everybody can say, look, I can get online, I can get a certificate for this and that, and so the question of quality, quality control, and all of this. So all of those are part of the work that we've been continuously doing in order to make sure that we reduce the cost of education and increase access.
I suppose maybe quick and brief follow-up question is more to do with the money.
Yeah.
But notwithstanding what the intentions may be, the general situation regarding funding for all of those things. Is government in a good place to do anything with, the intentions are there, the wish list is there, but is the funding available?
No, so some of the things that I'm talking about, Tim, are things that we are already doing. So there's focus in terms of the kind of direction, for instance, that UNISA need to be going as a platform. There's focus on some of the universities that are big on online or remote learning. Tshwane University of Technology and all. So there is work that's already being done. And if you listen to the president's announcement and also the Minister of Finance announcement, yes, they've made announcement on big budgetary cuts. But what they've also said is that some of the prioritization of spending is going to go into infrastructure towards technology, technology towards the fourth industrial revolution. So there is work that's been done. And we're hoping that, we could have more money as the post-school education and training sector so that we can, expand access and all of that.
All right. Remain standing there as I call Professor Hendricks to hand you a token of appreciation.
Oh, yes. It looks like a bottle of milk.
So, I can't help but tell you this story, that the Monaman, a quick one, that, sometimes when people see these things, whether on YouTube or Facebook or anywhere, and they hear about an event such as this one, coming from Pretoria, I know how people speak from around here. They'll be asking and saying, so, Nelira lebo booty, go liko pantitse ke meno. So liko pantitse men, liko pantitse ke meno. That's so good. Because a person like myself would not be expected to be at an event of this nature. You see the same, because There they're talking about higher learning and universities and all. Where now? Anyway, we're going for a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be hearing from the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Professor Ayo Yusuf, who is responsible for research and innovation at Sefako Makhatu University. We'll hear from him in a few moments. You know what people say. Yes, we continue with the second day of our conference, the Higher Education and Fourth IR, and an event organized by the School of Oral Health Sciences, Sefako Makhatu University. Now, it's a hybrid event, meaning, as we are all getting used to it, that you will have some people in a room and then other delegates attending from virtually from wherever they are. And Prof, you know, sometimes with these types of things, all of a sudden you find that the room is empty and you feel demoralized and you feel discouraged and you might take it personal and feel that it's got to do with you when it's got nothing to do with you, and many more people are actually connecting and linking with us here who want to hear your presentation. Professor Ayo Yusuf, a pleasure to catch up with you once again. And he's the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Research and Innovation with Sefako Makhatu University. Go for it, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, that's the pleasure of the 4IR and the digital transformation. You see yourself physically alone, but you know you're with so many people around the world. So first of all, I have to start by saying, thank you to all the organizers. After all, this is my institution, so I have to be very proud of what has happened, being the first, the university to host the first virtual Iadr Conference in the 50 years of existence. It's special for me too today because as a dentist, before I became an administrator, it's a déjà vu coming to Iadr Conference. Of course, very different when we used to present many years ago. So I'm going to also make it different. In the past, we'll do an abstract in dentistry. Today, I'm going to be speaking as a researcher or an administrator with oversight for research and innovation. So let me start by saying that research and innovation has become an important driver of transformation, particularly in South Africa as we move towards the knowledge-based economy as defined in the National Development Plan. So Sefako Makhatu Health Sciences seek to institutionalize and embed research culture as a lever for transforming quality teaching and learning, especially as it relates to supporting national health system priorities and the Sustainable Development Goals. You might not know, but Sefako Makhatu Health Sciences University was ranked in the UniRank Top 20 higher education institution in Africa. The university is therefore evidently on a growth trajectory. I must say that's also a power of technology. A 5-year-old university was able to put itself out there. I must say this is among about 30,000 higher education institutions in Africa, and was able to be picked up as one of the top 200 in terms of its presence, actually, more than anything else. So the quality and the focused academic enterprise, combined with the comprehensive nature of the university, places the university in a unique position to be responsible to national and international imperatives, such as the pandemics and developing indigenous knowledge system. It's important to always remember that we contextualize the fourth industrial revolution within these development goals, and not just for the sake of technology. And this is why I thought it was important to provide this context, particularly for Sefako Makhatu Health Sciences University. So we already have a number of these challenges in science and health and science education, but we are also responding to this already at SMU with internationally recognized centers of excellence, such as the Macro Clinical Research Unit, the South African Vaccination and Immunization Center, which was going to be playing, obviously, an important role in rolling out the COVID vaccine, the WHO Collaborating Center for Diarrhea Pathogen Research, the HPV STIs Training Center for Africa, are all set up to respond to current and future pandemics. However, of course, the COVID-19 has strengthened our resolve to make greater investment in these areas. So, importantly, though, we also recognize the fact that SMU is an employer and therefore an important economic hub in the Karankwa area. In this respect, part of our innovation is also to develop an entrepreneurship prowess. We're happy to announce that we've been able to secure some funding from the Small Enterprise Development Agency and renovate some buildings on the campus to host the Center for Entrepreneurship Rapid Incubators that will facilitate technology transfer to the community. As you heard earlier from the minister, this is not only just about digital transformation, and I'm going to say a little bit more about how this is relevant to dentistry and in terms of the contribution to township economy. So understanding the importance of increasing number of staff with doctorate qualification in improving our research productivity and innovation, we've embarked on a number of endeavors to actually increase a number of staff with doctorate. We've been able to move from 15 to 20%, also to invest in some state-of-the-art core research facilities. We'll be establishing the Africa Center for Bioimaging, which is bound to attract international scholars and postgraduate students. So I would like to encourage you to familiarize yourself with this strategic document that sets out innovation, including technology transfer, and the extends beyond technical or commercial application, but to supporting human condition. So going back to dentistry and the 4IR, obviously there's going to be a challenge in terms of what we call the digital divide. In general, currently in the world, about 44% of the world population are using social media. 60% have access to internet. Interestingly, in South Africa, only about 27% actually use social media, even though 80% have mobile phones. So data has become the problem, and it divides those who have from those who don't have to take maximum advantage of what technology has to give. But there also is the potential for a university like us to contribute to expanding this digital divide. What is also important to note is in terms of the 4IR or the Industry 4.0, the key drivers would be artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, 3D printing, big data, and of course, nanotechnology and biotechnology. Of course, we know in terms of nanotechnology, dentistry is quite involved in terms of your nanomaterials to get the best aesthetics that you can get from your dental materials, the aesthetic materials. In terms of 3D printing, we obviously also have the opportunity to have in dentistry leading 3D in terms of rapid prototyping, where you can actually today take some kind of impression and using big data and putting that into a computer through artificial intelligence can actually simulate what your tooth size could be like. Just imagine the world where you lose your tooth, and with 3D, you can actually print a new tooth and actually implant right away. That's the future of dentistry and the beauty that we may not have to lose our teeth again. And of course, that goes together with biotechnology. In dentistry, we know today that isolating high-quality human postnatal stem cells from accessible resources is a goal for stem cell research. And human deciduous teeth, that's the primary tooth, the baby tooth, contains a lot of these cells. And therefore, we are looking at a population that are highly proliferative and cholinergic cells in this human primary teeth. They call the shed. They'll be able to induce bone formation. So you can imagine if we're able to take advantage of this biotechnology and start having this patented, such that people can now, from being a baby, before you lose your tooth, you can actually keep your stem cells. If you have osteoporosis in future, you can just go back to the bank and collect those stem cells to stimulate bone formation. Or even you have cancer of the jaw and they have to remove your jaw, and you can actually go back to your stem cells and you have that regeneration. Saliva. Saliva is also an important part in dentistry. What biotechnology for future is going to be. It's more than just the spit. I have looked at this, I have presented this a couple of years ago. More importantly is the fact that, like block-based analysis, it has two purposes: to identify individuals with disease and to follow progress of affected individuals. I'm sure you all know, for COVID diagnosis, saliva has become an important medium to diagnose COVID. It's more efficient, and there's FDA has approved this for research in the United States, and I'm just looking forward for this to get into South Africa, and we are going to have much more faster and efficient tests for COVID diagnosis. And of course, saliva also goes on to be able to get what we call the amylase activity, which is more sensitive for people who are likely to have, or who have just had a rupture of a aortic aneurysm. So you might be able to have a dentist that will be able to just use that to be able to detect and the risk for aortic aneurysm. The same thing for endocrine functions. Saliva is a very powerful medium to be able to test for monitoring steroids, progesterone, testosterone, and different hormonal levels. So going back to the imagination that we're going to have in the fourth industrial revolution is that you can actually now get to a dentist, your data, to give you what we call personalized dental medicine. The dentist just needs to put in your ID. It will be able to draw your data from all medical visits, all surgical events that you've had, would be able to draw if you've got stem cells in your bank, and voila, with a push of a button, you just put your saliva in a tube, and it's going to be able to give you a rundown where you are, because all the big data that comes in, including where you stay, the temperature of where you be living, is going to be able to give you a diagnosis very quickly. Of course, it could be very invasive, and that's one of the areas that we're looking at, the ethical part of it. People are more likely to provide information for this kind of thing if they know that that information is secured. For example, if it gets into the hands of insurance and they have all of this data about you, next thing you're going to get in your mailbox is your insurance premium has gone up, because they're able to know that you've been able to either get into a cardiovascular event in the last 2 weeks, and therefore automatically push it into an actuary calculation of what your new premium is going to be. So the fourth industrial revolution, dentistry is going to be in the middle of this for some time to come. I'm going to speak briefly because I know even the deputy minister was quite interesting, was able to pick up dentistry within digital transformation, that you can actually 3D print a denture or your crown, which is something that we already know very much. The augmented and virtual reality, I need to mention, in terms of skills training and tooth prep, the augmented reality can actually begin to help us to develop. Research has shown that you can actually test more skills through augmented reality, pressure in which the person, the student is putting to prepare the tooth, and you can actually see the simulation. So that's something that we need to start thinking about as we move away from a physical, as much as possible to move away from a physical contact learning and curriculum. And I must also add, in terms of teaching and curriculum, we do not have to have everybody follow a physical or a remote. So people might elect to actually do remote from home, join the lecture. Others might decide to be physically present because of the digital divide. Your home is not conducive for you to learn from home, or you don't have the network, and therefore you decide to come to campus. There'll be accommodation for you, and for those who decide to stay at home, there will also be opportunity, and they all can learn. And that's what the fourth industrial revolution to give to us. In terms of research, what we need to begin to understand is not every material that you can print on 3D that can stay on long term and retain in the oral cavity. So the challenge for the oral health fraternity is to begin to test different materials, how long they can stay in oral cavity, and you can actually get retention and dimension to be stable in a 3D form. And for example, if I put, what material will I have to use to print a tooth form? If you do an intraoral scan, do a radiological scan, and actually use, with all that data, keep it. When the person loses the tooth, can you then put that in an artificial intelligence to actually redo the form and shape of your previous tooth, and they get into a 3D in a material that can actually get integrated as an implant into your oral cavity. So I've talked about personalized oral health care, how digital big data can be used for that. And of course, I think I need to mention before I leave teledentistry. In terms of, people have always asked, how can people in the rural, far rural, remote places benefit from 4IR? And this is the kind of thing that we can do. You may be sitting right in the village. There could be an oral hygiene or a dental nurse that can put you close to either, of course, you can take an X-ray and then send this to the Smu, the dental hospital. A specialist will sit there and make a diagnosis and be able to provide, you can even take the x-rays and actually be able to provide a 3D print and send it off to the rural area. It becomes so accurate that you can actually get your denture without having to travel all the way. Can you imagine a world like that? And that's the kind of challenge that I'm giving to the dental fraternity. And we must not see ourselves, we must not underrate ourselves in South Africa. We can actually be leaders in this area. I'm sure you've all seen, I was quite proud to see the advert of the School of Oral Health, to see how the artificial intelligence used in orthodontics to actually begin to read KEF points. I've seen the prosthodontics also use of it. So the School of Oral Health in SMU, I remember somebody calling me to say, you know, I never imagined that you had all of this technology in the School of Oral Health Sciences, that's SMU. They're so focused on looking at the newspaper only of when there is a strike, And I want to invite the world, and I imagine everybody's listening to me, to say, come to the School of Oral Health Sciences at the SMU, and you will be surprised of what you see and the intellectual capacity to actually drive the fourth industrial revolution. Thank you, and I'm happy to take questions.
And thanks very much, Prof. Appreciate it. We actually want to give you a token of appreciation that you are here with us, and Professor Hendricks will hand over that. But let me also add my voice to say I'm impressed that the institution is thinking outside the box. Under your leadership, you're coming up with the innovations that you mentioned that will help give momentum to the ideas, because as we all know, sometimes thinkers, academics can conceptualize things, but the critical part becomes the implementation of those things. So with added entrepreneurship behind that, one hopes that the university will march on and become part of this new revolution, the fourth industrial revolution. Thanks again, Professor.
Thank you very much.
That's Professor Ayo Yusuf.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Ayo Yusuf, and for leading us the way you do. Also, just to acknowledge him, the stuff he's been talking about, much of what he was probably started when he was deep. I want to affirm you, and thank you for now. We can just follow many of the things that you started for us. Thank you. Thank you very much for speaking.
Thank you.
And thank you again for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
All right, we're going to hear from the sponsors. And then when we come back, we will be hearing from Professor Nyalunga, Dr. Nyalunga.
When you look at laser dentistry, which I think is important why we went into the oral healthcare profession, it's got to work, meaning that we do need clinical outcomes. What if I provide something that's able to at least decrease pain, but sometimes even pain-free? If you have periodontal laser procedures, you're taking an ibuprofen. You're getting up the next day. Patients are going to want laser for dentistry. They realize that they're going to have minimal discomfort. It's going to be faster than other procedures. I highly recommend, if you want to be successful for the next 5 years, you've got to start doing minimally invasive dentistry.
Yeah. So, thank you. As we continue with our program, and Dr. Nyalunga is with me, and he's going to tell us a bit more about the SMU laser innovation, merging the fourth IR with the health sciences. Dr. Nyalunga, pleasure to have you with us, sir.
Thank you. Yes, I'll be talking to you about lasers, laser innovation. As you can see here, this was a class of 2020 that graduated from for a mastership in laser dentistry. And South Africa was well represented, as you can see amongst the people who are in this picture. Just to say that I had one of my students, ex-students, who was also in the same class of the laser dentistry. I got my mastership in laser dentistry from Aachen University in Germany. As you can see on the left-hand side, that's the university. And on the right-hand side, you've got the laser center in Aachen. Hopefully, in some few years to come, in about 5 years or so, perhaps, who knows, we can have Sefako Makhato bring us a laser center in the school. That will be quite an achievement. And I've heard a lot from the previous speakers to say that we should actually be driving the innovation. We've come a long way with lasers. As you can see here, previously, the lasers that were there historically, we've had the Cavo 1992, and the Photona in 1993. And of course, the BioLaser laser came into the market in 1995. So like cars, as the cars develop, the lasers have also progressed from one laser to another. Are lasers dangerous? Should we be scared of lasers? Yes, of course, lasers are dangerous. So if we're talking about lasers, we should also think about safety, laser safety. And if you are doing any studies with lasers, or you're studying for your mastership or your MSc for lasers, one of the requirements is to have a laser safety officer. It's a separate exam that you write on lasers before you are actually able to utilize lasers. But I know, of course, a lot of dental practices around. I know my colleagues are using some lasers in their practices. Little to know if they do have such clearances for the laser safety. I think the regulations vary from one country to another, but of course, in the teaching fraternity, we should be able to teach our students and whoever is studying or dealing with lasers to do necessary laser safety. Now, lasers have also been utilized in medicine across for ophthalmology, neurology, pulmonology, and of course, other different disciplines of medicine. But my focus on my talk today will be on dentistry and the different type of lasers that we use in dentistry. The most common being the ND-YAG and the erbium-YAG, the erbium chrome, YSGG, the CO2 lasers, and the diode lasers. What is a laser? How do we define a laser? A laser, in terms of science, defined as a light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. Now, if we talk about light, as we can see even in this room, we're surrounded by so much light. There's a lot you can say about light. But in this case, when we talk about a laser, we're talking about a high spectral energy and power density. We're talking about a light that is also monochromatic and selective. What are the basic components in a laser system? Well, you have what we call a pump source, which can either be a gas discharge, electric or optic. And you also have what we call a laser active medium. This can be either gases, liquids, semiconductors, solid state materials. And a laser is never complete without its optical resonators, which are the mirrors. These aspects of the laser are responsible for the line spectrum and the collimated beam and the optical feedback. Now, what do you also want out of a laser? You want a laser, you want a system that will provide a pinless procedure that will also be selective, effective, and comfortable for the patient. As you've heard before as well, people have been talking about having a patient-centered type of graduates. Now, I've highlighted already the different lasers used in dentistry, but I'll just indicate which laser is used for what. Now, we can use lasers for cavity preparation, for cardiology. In this case, we use an erbium chrome YSGG 2780 nanometers. Now, if you're going to talk about lasers you don't talk about lasers without mentioning the wavelength. So every laser has got a specific wavelength, and that wavelength determines what the laser is able to do in terms of laser-tissue interaction. For your soft tissue surgery or soft tissue treatment, we use what we call the the diode lasers. And of most commonly used is the epic diode, which is a 980 nanometers. We do have this type of laser at Sefako University, and I was privileged to use this laser for some of my clinical cases for my mastership in laser dentistry. Other lasers which are also used, the epic laser for endodontic, for laser endodontic, laser-assisted endodontic treatment. And of course, you've got your NDX lasers. Now, dental caries is still a disease that causes a lot of pain and discomfort on dental patients. It has been for quite a number of decades or previous years. The procedure to remove and restore teeth can be scary, painful, and uncomfortable to patients. The use of lasers in the painless removal of dental caries and restoration of teeth to normal aesthetic and function has revolutionized dentistry. Like I indicated earlier, this is your Erbium Chrome YSGG, the water lace 20780 nanometer, which is best suited for laser-supported cariology and cavity preparation. It would be also a good thing to have in the academia this type of laser system, which also has a dual wavelength for both hard tissue and soft tissue treatment. Yeah, the other laser that is also used in connection with the, in relation to the Erbium laser is your Erbium YEG 2940 nanometer, which is also best suited for cariology and cavity preparation. Now, when you talk about lasers, you cannot talk about lasers without actually referring to your electromagnetic spectrum. So in this case, we are talking about, I'm sure you are familiar with the different colors of the rainbow. As you can see there, the electromagnetic spectrum shows different colors. But we are talking about a narrow spectrum in your electromagnetic spectrum between 10 to the power minus 1 to 10⁻⁰ wavelength that we utilize as lasers for dentistry. Now, the biophysical background in terms of laser wavelength and the electromagnetic spectrum. Here you can see which areas our dental lasers fall in. Most of them are found in the near infrared and mid infrared area of the electromagnetic spectrum. So in the mid infrared, we find the Erbium YEG 2940 nanometer, and in the near infrared, we find the Erbium Chrome YSGG, as I've mentioned earlier on. And of course, you also have in the range of 400 to 700 nanometers, that's where you find your visible light. Now, lasers interact with different tissues differently. So there's a laser absorption, there's a link between the laser absorption and the wavelength of the laser. In this slide, you can see how different tissues get to absorb lasers. If you radiate the tissues with a laser, you can see the interaction between different tissues with the laser. For example, you see the erbium in this slide, it's highly absorbed in water. So if you are using if you're gonna use a laser in a tissue that is that has got a lot of water, you would prefer to use an erbium laser. And of course, your diode lasers have got a lower water absorption compared to your erbium laser, linked to their wavelength. Again, this is just to show the different wavelengths as to the tissues that take up different wavelengths. The biophysical background, the interaction between laser wavelength and specific tissue is strongly dependent on the optical properties of its tissue. For example, enamel is a highly mineralized tissue composed of 85% mineral, 12% water, and 3% organic material by volume. On the other side, dentine has significant high content of organic material and water of organic material of 33% and water of 20%, and only 47% of mineral tissue by volume. The occurrence of caries directly affects the mineral and water tissue content. As mineral is lost, its volume is replaced by water. So in caries affected dentine, the water content is in average of 27% by volume, but can reach up to 54% depending on the disease stage. So if you have a very carious tooth, grossly carious tooth, you would have a high percentage of water content in the enamel. Due to their composition, enamel and dentine show high absorption of wavelengths at the mid-infrared, like I've mentioned before, range. In this region, the spectrum scattering is negligible and energy deposition is determined by the absorption coefficients and tissue reflection. This is just the literature background on the lasers. Now, if you are using a laser, especially in soft tissues, you've got to first initiate the tip before you utilize the laser tip. We call it pre-initiation. Now, what this does to the laser tip? It helps to prevent what you call carbonization on the tissues, on the soft tissue. With carbonization, you have irreversible damage to the soft tissue. So in this case, if you initiate your tip first before utilizing it, you can actually have irreversible damage to the tissue. Now, as I said earlier on, the biophysical background, laser tissue interaction depended on wavelength and the kind of tissue. And of course, the energy density, the amount of energy that you deposit in that tissue. And of course, the time exposition. If you're gonna be using a laser on the tissue, it's important to realize and to know how long you're exposing that tissue to the laser. And the cooling components in that tissue, for example, if you have blood vessels or water. So those act as a very important cooling aspects for the laser. And of course, the mode of operation, whether you're using the laser in contact or non-contact mode. The pulse duration, the hertz rate, and of course, in the settings, you can manipulate the water percentage and the air percentage. Now, laser tip inspections, we normally use this type of tool to assess the condition of the laser tip. These are your laser settings you'd use, for example, in case of cavity preparation for an EBIA-MEC 2780 nanometers. You'd also use what you call a laser tip MZ6 in a non-contact mode. Now, how does the laser actually affect the hard tissue structure? What happens when you irradiate the hard tissue with the laser? Now, the dental hard tissue removal can be achieved by two mechanisms. The first one is the so-called explosive ablation, and by explosive vaporization. The explosive ablation happens by the so-called water-mediated, we're talking about the water-mediated thermomechanical ablation. So in this process, light is absorbed by water molecules and rapidly hitting a small volume in the tissue, in this case in the enamel, and the vaporization of water creates a strong subsurface pressure and leads to an explosive removal of the surrounding mineral. This is just a schematic presentation to explain how the laser actually affects the tissue. As you can see here, water within the dental hard tissues absorbs the laser energy, quickly expands and vaporizes, the pressure generated by the water expansion is extremely high and overcomes the strength of the mineral matrix, resulting in micro explosions that removes the hard tissue. Of course, this is another model that shows how energy is deposited on the enamel, on the subsurface layer, resulting in an instant explosion of water to vapor, creating shock wave which removes the surface of hydroxyapatite crystals. Laser-assisted cardiology and cavity preparation. If caries that requires treatment is diagnosed, it is still necessary to remove the diseased dental hard tissue, and the following criteria applies for the preparation. So the laser is, as I said earlier on, it's selective. So you need to preserve dental hard tissue and only selectively remove the diseased tissue, in this case, which is the caries. And of course, be able to preserve the liveliness of the pulp so that the pulp is tolerable. And of course, the patient tolerability is also very important, resulting in the prevention of new caries. Now, this is the laser that you use for the soft tissues, the Epic Pro laser. These are the settings that you would use in the Epic Pro laser for soft tissue surgery. I've just included these slides to show you what we can do with lasers in terms of soft tissue surgery. In this case, we've got a fibrous polyp on the lower lip in an edentulous area on the left side, close to the vermilion border. This lesion is dome-shaped lesion, firm to touch and same color as the surrounding oral mucosa. Painless but irritating to sensation, and patient keeps biting their lower lip. But you can see what we can do post laser treatment. You can see how we have removed the lesion. And of course, with your settings that I've highlighted earlier on, you would use a 0.8 watt for this kind of procedure. Other procedures that lasers are used for is for treatment of highly vascularized soft lesions in the oral cavity. In this case, the laser was utilized for removal of lobular capillary hemangioma. As you can see, this lesion is a very highly vasculated lesion, which bleeds easily, even just to slight touch. These were the settings that were utilized actually post removal of the lesion. You don't have to put a suture. You can do what we call a laser bandage with the laser. That causes a hemostasis, and as a result, you are able to prevent further bleeding. In this case, you can see how we have achieved, or how the hemostasis was achieved post-removal of the hemangioma, resulting in a scarring that actually stopped the bleeding that would have happened without. And 1 week later, post-treatment, you can see how nicely the patient and the tissue has healed without actually utilizing any sutures. And just to mention that in the other advantage of using lasers is because it's a painless procedure, in some instances you don't even have to utilize local anesthesia. You can actually, with your settings, put the setting in such a way that the patient is not able to perceive the pain from what you are doing in the mouth. So the Epic X laser is also utilized for gingivectomy, your crown lengthening procedures. In this case, where you might have gingival overgrowth between teeth, two carious teeth, as you can see there between the tooth 1.5 and 1.6, there's an overgrowth of tissue, and the laser was utilized to remove that tissue prior to doing endodontic treatment. So the gingival overgrowth interproximally between the grossly carious teeth, and especially with endodontic treatment, has to be carried out at the same time, cannot only be a nuisance, but interfere with visibility from bleeding of inflamed gingival tissue. The laser was not only used for remove of inflamed gingival tissue, but also for hemostasis in the area of treatment, The cleaning of root canal was done by using the pro taper, of course, the usual procedure that you utilize for doing endo treatment. However, root canal disinfection and sterility was also enhanced by utilizing the laser. So you can actually use the settings in the laser to effect disinfection in the root canal. By the way, as we said, the laser is a monochromatic light. It's able to kill microbacteria in the root canal because the bacteria also have got some coloration. They've got color that actually helps to absorb the laser. So in that way, you are able to disinfect the canal and have a successful outcome from your laser treatment. As you can see here, post-laser treatment, we've been able to remove the soft tissue and, of course, effect proper endodontic treatment by building distal built wall of the tooth to be able to contain the solutions during endodontic treatment. Now, how much of laser curriculum is taught in dental schools? Should the schools be teaching lasers in dental schools? The answer, of course, is yes, because your graduates, as I talk now, are actually buying the laser machines, and they're using them in their practices. But the schools should take lead in terms of educating and forming a foundation that would make sure that our graduates, when they go out there and utilize those lasers, they're not just button pushers. They understand the whole mechanism behind the utilization and the science behind using lasers, so that both the patients are safe and the operators are safe from using lasers. Because without that knowledge base, there is always a high risk of litigation from either the patient or the patient not necessarily receiving the intended treatment. As they say, with laser safety, you only see the laser twice. One with your left eye, once with your left eye, the second time with your right eye. And then you can imagine what happens to you after that. It means you'll be blind. So both the patient must be protected, they have to wear safety goggles, and the operator must also be protected. And the laser science must be clearly displayed in the laser surgery. There's no way you can use a laser in a surgery without actually making sure that you have those signs clearly displayed in your practice. Now, what do you do after qualifying as a laser dentist? Of course, you can join the IADR, and we have, in that IADR, we have community discussion groups where we discuss minimally invasive dentistry utilizing the laser. So by selectively using the laser, you are able to only remove the decayed tooth structure and preserving the surrounding, the normal tooth structure. You can also become part of the World Academy for Laser Education, which meets annually, and you're up to date with the utilization of lasers. The ISLD, this is the International Society for Laser Dentistry, is also hosting a lot of information on lasers. And of course, you can do research. There's a lot of research that needs to be done in lasers and do publication so that we can advance this new technology. For those who are interested, the next 18th ISLD, Laser Dentistry World Congress, will be held in Cairo in 2021, provided, of course, the COVID-19 allows people to travel. It will be a nice thing just to enhance your knowledge on lasers by attending this. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dr. Nyalunga. And I've got a couple of questions for you that have been sent through. One of the questions is, are you at the University of Makhatu teaching lasers to undergraduates? And the second one is, how are the sciences taken by students and what are the costs?
I'm glad my CEO is here, Professor Hendricks is here. I think he's taking note of that. So it's a challenge, but I liked what Dr. Muathe said yesterday, and this sets a challenge even to the school. SMU has got a lot of land, But Tim, you coming from Harankua, you probably know the yard, how big the yard is. And I have had to travel to Germany to study lasers and to use their laboratories there. But of course, we have to have our own systems here. It is quite expensive to train a dentist, but let alone to train a laser dentist, it's even more expensive. So it's a challenge to the school. We are not yet training laser dentists, but it's an open opportunity. And here I am, Prof. Hendricks, I hope you'll make good use of me. And the Germans are also ready to assist us in terms of way forward. There's a company called BioLace, which is a sci-vision company, which is also prepared to collaborate with the school in terms of providing the high-tech laser systems for dentistry.
Okay. So question of costs and...
Yes, costs, it is actually, I know some of my colleagues here in Pretoria, in Sunnyside, who are using even the water lace. But if I were to give you the cost price of a water lace, it's nothing below R1 million to have that machine in your practice. But so encouraging because they can see the value. The dentist can see the value, and it makes a difference in terms of the patient appreciating what you can do with a laser machine. If you have children who are scared of a dentist and the drill that you can use. Now, if you have kids that you can bring into your surgery, and without even injecting them, utilizing LA, you are able to excavate that caries, and the child is happy, who would not want to come back again for treatment in your practice.
No, thanks very much, Dr. Nyalunga. So I was right earlier on when I
Yes.
said people will be asking, what are you doing at an SMU event? So I'll tell them when we get back. When we get back, who would have known? We'll be talking laser and all the stuff that we mentioned. Thanks very much for your presentation. And it's a raffle. There's nothing for the doctor, or he's part of the family. He's getting nothing, or he'll get. Prof, are we doing the raffle first, or the handover of the token of appreciation?
The handover first, then
Okay,
we'll
all
do
right.
the...
If you can go over there. Thanks, Doc.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Tim.
much. So give them to Prof.
Congratulations, Doctor, to the presentation.
Thank you, Prof.
You set the challenge of the R1 million laser machine. I'm sure Brother Bratum, like you called him, Bratum, with his contacts.
Yes,
organize
yes.
5 million,
Definitely.
Then we get 5 of those machines.
Definitely, Prof. Thank you.
Thanks, Doc. Thank you. And Professor Stusa, we have a bit of a raffle to run here, apparently.
We are privileged to receive a voucher of 5,000 rands, which has been donated by Strawman. And Strawman is a company which supplies high-tech material, cutting-edge technology, to the prosthodontic community of the country. And we found it fitting that we would choose the entries from the prosthodontic pool. So we put all their names together in one little cup, and there are 12 of them. And then we're just going to pick one name, and that will be the name, that will be the person who's going to get the voucher. And I'm going to, in a minute, ask Mr. Modise to choose one or to pull out one name out of that. Now, there are a few conditions attached to this, and I must just read them. The first one is that the voucher is valid for 3 months, up until the end of February 2021. And the second condition is that the products are limited to, and I'm sure the prosthodontic fraternity will know what this means, the SDIS, the NDIS, biomaterials, Mendentica, and clear correct only. That is no digital equipment. and the voucher is to be used once off. That is, you cannot split the money. The voucher is valid for one person, and the winner and name of the winner will be supplied to the company after this event. So, Mr. Modise, please select one name from the 12 that we have entered, and
All right, let's
announce
see.
the winner.
Let's see.
Are we going to have a drum roll?
Thank you. Sitole, MP, I think.
Yes.
Sitole MP. That's the name that we drew from this. So it was a fair and open process, verified by the top auditing firms in the country. The Hawks were informed about this thing. The NPA is very much aware of us running this. And if there's anybody who has issues with the draw, you can always go to the public protector. But we believe that it was a free and fair and open raffle. And otherwise, beyond this, I don't want to incriminate myself. Thanks, Prof.
Thank you very much, and congratulations to Sitole.
Okay, congratulations. And we're now going to break for tea. And we will be back at 11. Is that 11? It's 15 minutes, and then we should be back here, but we'll hear from the Deputy Minister, I think, Joe Patlav, later on. Am I correct? 22. Thank you very much.
When you look at laser dentistry, which I think is important, why we went into the oral healthcare profession, it's got to work, meaning that we do need clinical outcomes.